Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for June 30th, 2022. My name is Mark Hillary.
I'm Peter Ryan. Mark, great to be back with you. And it is always a pleasure to welcome our listeners from around the world to the CX Files.
Well, it's certainly good. Nice weather down here in Brazil right now. How is it looking like summer there?
Well, where I am right now in Central Europe, it is absolutely gorgeous. We have had a tremendous amount of sunshine, and I don't think my tan has ever been as good right now.
Okay, so let's go to the interview. We're talking this week with Colson Hillier, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Alorica. Colson's based out in New Jersey, and he talked to us about resilience and some of the lessons learned during the pandemic. You know, there's been a lot of innovation and change in the world of CX, things like accepting work from home as normal or GigCX. All of these kind of changes have now been adopted and are now just considered a normal part of BPO delivery. So Colson really talks about some of those lessons and how he thinks we're going to see CX moving forward.
And, you know, Mark, Alorica is an organization that both you and I have had a lot of exposure to over the years. The growth of the company, especially over the past decade, has just been tremendous. Great leadership has been a facet of the company, and that ability to adapt and to be resilient is really a hallmark of Alorica. So I truly believe that Colson is a great individual to be talking about this subject. And Mark, I think when we consider resilience in the CX space, there may be individuals that scoff and are not going to take the concept seriously, but those are also the same individuals that would have been caught out in March of 2020, not ready for the massive shift that took place towards the work from home model. The ability for a CX organization, whether it's an outsourcer or a captive, to be able to manage significant change in a short amount of time, I think is the demonstration. It's a hallmark of the ability of that same CX organization to drive the best outcomes for its consumers.
Yeah, and this is not just a story of innovation or being able to react quickly, but there is a complete culture change, I think, that you need to embrace within the organization. In the interview, Colson talks a lot about how agents are working together as a team, regardless of where they're actually working. So instead of all these stories you hear about people working at home and finding that they're isolated, you know, Alorica seems to have built a system that really allows anybody to contribute as part of a team from anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so important around the culture piece. And this is something that we've talked about on a number of our podcasts the past couple of years. The reality is culture plays a major part, not just in terms of making sure people are happy at work, but making sure that people want to stay in a workplace. And especially in times of disruption, in times of great change within not just a company, but perhaps the macro level environment in which a company is playing, for individuals to realize that they're part of a team and their contribution matters and is being recognized in a positive fashion counts for so much in terms of not just being able to drive the best outcomes, but to ensure that individuals with talent and motivation want to stay and continue to drive those great outcomes.
Okay, that's fantastic. So let's go straight to the interview with Colson Hillier from Alorica. All right, Colson, it's great to get you on the CX Files. Now, we've learned a lot in this industry throughout the past couple of years. I mean, clearly there's been a great focus on resilience coming out of the pandemic. And I think that maybe it would be a great idea if you could introduce some of the lessons that you guys have learned at Alorica, but maybe first just sort of tee up the company itself. You know, who are you guys? How big is the company? What are you doing? And then what have you kind of learned in the past couple of years through this kind of strange period?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, so Alorica is a massive global provider of customer experience services. We service about 200 clients from the largest enterprises down to digital-first startups. And we're partners in helping to provide the right customer experience, whether that's revenue generation, customer care, technical support, collections, basically any aspect of how a brand and a customer interacts. And we do that by providing everything from experience and consulting design through to operations of call centers and digital transformation initiatives, and a lot of the analytics that go around that in verticals like finance and telecom and life sciences and gaming, et cetera. And, you know, if you think about the impact that the pandemic had on companies, we're sort of a case study on the number of different sort of levers and dials that could be impacted. A global operator operating in about 72 countries with 100,000 people, most of which were working in one of our contact centers at the time, and trying to figure out how to sort of maintain continuity or resiliency, as you say, at a point where all of a sudden the world changes was an incredible case study and something I won't soon forget in my career. But now as we've come out of that sort of break the glass moment, and we're sort of thinking about what the attitudes and changes are in the marketplace. To your point, I'd say that COVID and the pandemic, it didn't necessarily change the sort of strategies that we had been working on, but it accelerated a lot of them to a significant degree, primarily around things like distributed work and workforce models. And sort of the blend and mix of technology with human capital, which was typically where service was provided before. So, you know, from a workforce perspective, to your point, we went from all office into a sort of a mix of work from home, what we call connection hubs, or sort of a hybrid model. We still do maintain some office presence, and then we brought in new approaches like GigCX and part-time workforce. And on the digital side, it's just really intensified based on the need for resiliency, you know, customer preference and speed and simplicity, and really trying to figure out how to find the right mix between, you know, a digital front end and having the back end that can support any sort of problem or concern that requires problem solving, empathy, and the like. So certainly seismic shifts, and I think around it all is sort of validation of the value and importance of having a partner that knows how to execute and can go along that journey with your client. So the whole overall space of business process outsourcing responded very effectively to some of those challenges, and we were at the front of that. So it's been a interesting couple of years, no doubt.
That's excellent. And you mentioned a kind of a blend as a response there, especially to this need for greater resilience now. We're talking about a mix of people in contact centers, people working from home, multiple office locations, you know, even using different geographies, you know, all to sort of get this 100% service guarantee. So how are you approaching that now? I mean, do you have a sort of step-by-step process that you're using when you talk to the clients?
We do, and in fact, you know, as we've gone through this, it hasn't been about, you know, just the front end, right? It's not just about moving an agent from their office to work at home and making sure that they can get connectivity. It's really pointing to a lot of the foundational requirements of how you hire, how you train, how you manage the performance, and how you build culture in a much different environment, right? You don't have folks walking the floor during the course of the day and having team huddles in the morning to share information and driving to, you know, celebratory events and coaching and that sort of thing in the way that we traditionally have. And so, you know, what we've been spending a lot of time on are what are the underpinnings of what it takes to deliver that same throughput to support our customers, the same quality of delivery, and the same culture or sort of support that we talk about as Aloricans, which is sort of our family motto around the folks that work for us. And, you know, a lot of that is having the right infrastructure. So ensuring that, you know, things are cloud-based and can easily be set up with hot redundancy and scalability. Thinking about underpinnings like knowledge management and customer relationship management as tools, as opposed to just a sort of repository of information, sort of activating those for the front line, and bring a lot of analytics to bear. One of the things, Mark, that I'm most proud of, and I think really helped us through the past couple of years, is putting our agents at the forefront of understanding where we are effective and where we have opportunities. And so when you do that, you have to provide them the tools, right? So we have a platform called Connect. It's a mobile app. It's also a website. And every day agents come in, they're asked a couple of questions, right? And there's very simple questions. It's, are you confident? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 5? And once you get through those questions, you have a sort of an environment that gives you all the latest information you need. It's sort of gamified, so you meet everybody that's on your team, whether they're sitting next to you or sitting across the world. It provides you all the information you need around your pay and your schedule. But it also sort of helps to create that glue across all of our programs and all of our employees, regardless of what sort of workforce model they're in, what geo they're servicing from. And it gives us immediate feedback that we can take and pull into our big data platform. So in addition, if you get an agent that says, I'm not confident or not happy, a team lead can reach out to them right away and make sure that they're cared for. But what happens as you start to amass data from 100,000 agents, and you start to introduce surveys into that process. So we ask how they're doing at their training, how they're doing after nesting, how they're doing after the first 30 days. And they break down everything that needs to happen in those windows into these, what I call like sub-segments or sub-deliverables. And so within training, was your instructor effective? Was your training curriculum delivered in a way that you understood it? Did you get the right sort of comprehension before being put into a live environment? And as you amass this feedback from 100,000 agents over time, you can start to see where you've got issues, not just at a personal level, but at a program level or at a corporate level. And when you pull that into a dashboard and you can share that with your clients, they get a transparent view to what's working and what's not. Some of those things are on Alorica and up to us to fix. Others are opportunities with our clients. And it's basically become the platform that we use in order to understand, how are things working for somebody at home versus in site, or a gig agent versus a full-time agent, and where are the opportunities within training, not just saying that training was, somewhat broken because we didn't see the results we wanted afterwards. And it's that sort of listening, pulling together those and synthesizing all those data points, and then having what we call hypercare, or the sort of combination of Alorica and our clients that sit down and look at that data and take action. And to me, it's those structural changes that are most important to get right coming out of pandemic. We learned a lot during pandemic, but if you want to stay resilient and you want to build yourself into sort of a future-proof model, it's more about the platform than it is about the action. And that's been an area of a lot of focus for both us and our clients over the past 6 months.
That is really interesting. And I think that point about the platform it's really exciting because, there's so many organizations that had to rapidly adopt a work from home or a hybrid model. And I think that they found that was the most difficult part of all, because you create that kind of twin track organization. There's an organization that's still kind of using the office, and then there's the remote organization, and it's very hard to kind of knit everything together. And that's what I really wanted to ask you about, was the kind of human interaction, and how essential the kind of customer to agent interaction is when we're seeing so much digital transformation at the moment. It seems that you've really placed a lot of importance on the role of the agent and giving them the tools to support them in their job. And yet, if we look at a lot of the CX news at the moment, everything is all about, how we're getting better self-service, how we're integrating into Siri and Alexa, how we're improving our chatbots and doing natural language processing and stuff. So it seems like the agent might become like a third level support. There's all these other sort of interactions you have with a brand before you get to the agent. So does that really kind of elevate the role of the agent then?
Yeah, listen, I think that when we talk about the platforms that we mentioned, I use the agent because I think it's the start point. It's where most folks are coming from. But when you have a platform-oriented mindset, you're thinking about every endpoint. And so whether it's your CRM platform or your knowledge management platform or your call routing platform, all these things need to work in concert. And while the agent is sort of a critical component of the delivery paradigm, it's clear that customers value the speed, simplicity, and self-service in a way that has continued to grow and will continue to grow over time. And I think one of the first things to recognize is that those digital experiences don't just happen by flipping a switch or signing a technology license. It's this blend and continuum of human and digital that makes digital work better, right? So it may start with fallout, right? So I've tried to set up some simple questions and things that I believe I can solve digitally, but when I can't, I need an agent to backstop that. And as that agent provides the response, you're creating data exhaust, which then feeds the algorithms that drive, that bot to be more effective the next time that it's, handling that intent. And so this idea of and really the point in time that I think we're in is one where humans being enabled by technology is critical. And in doing so, you're creating a lot of the data corpus that you need in order to make technology more effective. And it's going to get better and better, whether it's understanding natural language or giving the right sort of output and response. But today, Mark, still, depending on who you look at, 60 to 70% of interactions are handled utilizing voice. And as that number continues to shrink, it will only shrink if you can deliver a strong enough service experience digitally that you meet the needs of the customer, you're more efficient in terms of your cost to serve, and that the sort of resolution is satisfactory in order to keep that from becoming a problem downstream or something like that. So, in my view, the balance of human and technology is most critical. There will continue, because it's a multi-sided market, right? Customers love it, clients like it. We appreciate digital because all of it makes us more efficient. But at the same time, if you get that wrong, you can really damage your brand and damage the customer's perception of whether or not you are committed to providing a great service experience. And I talk a lot about brands that will spend $1 billion working on their marketing budgets, developing amazing products, distributing them through their retail partners or whatever e-commerce channel they might have. And it all looks fantastic in a green path. But a customer's perception of a brand or of a product is often determined by that one contact that they have. And that's your opportunity to determine whether or not you develop an apostle or a detractor. And so, not having the right sort of human backstop and driving this from a customer's perspective can really hurt you. So to me, it's about, yes, digital is huge. It's getting better. It's coming along, but it's both enabled by humans and it needs to be backstopped by humans.
Well, this call came about because I read a Gartner Magic Quadrant that had said, it was talking about the big BPO brands and how you were all kind of coming out of the pandemic. And it mentioned Alorica particularly, saying, you're exploring multiple innovations. And one area was GigCX, which, I thought was particularly interesting. I wrote a book about GigCX about a year ago. And so, it really sort of stood out, because a lot of people have been kind of frightened of this and considering it like a replacement for the contact center. But how have you guys been using it? Because when we were just talking, you were mentioning, we've got part-time agents, we've got GigCX agents. So it seems like you're kind of creating a blended solution. How is that working for you?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for mentioning Gartner. We're honored to be sort of placed as a leader for the second year in a row. And part of what they looked at was how well we can execute in meeting customer expectations and what sort of creative solutions we were bringing in order to do that. And Gig was one of those solutions. And if you think about Gig, it's really part of the same conversation, which is how do you most efficiently map demand to supply? And in the past, you only had so many levers and dials to do that with, right? So if you had to bring everybody into an office, you couldn't necessarily ramp as quickly or find the right skill sets or language requirements as you can when you have a wider net with work from home. Well, Gig is almost an extension of that, right? So it says, okay, now that I've sort of, I call it cutting with a machete, right? I figured out how to solve for the core of the service delivery experience. I brought in the right sort of digital to human capital mix. I still have inconsistencies in things like my call arrival pattern, or there may be queues where a very specialized skill set or language is required. And that can be, a drive like holiday rush. It could be something that's done weekly, like you get more calls on a Monday versus the balance of the week as there's pent up demand, or even during a day, right? If you think about folks that are having, flash sales, or there's certain demand drives for sort of, food delivery and things like that. And those programs are very difficult to hire, train, and support when they're very bursty. And gig is a perfect opportunity to fill in that sort of yield curve and match sort of the efficient frontier of demand and supply. And it doesn't come without challenges. Everything is determined by the gig agent, so you need to think about how you provide different models of training that are self-paced and the agent can take at their own leisure. You need to make sure that you deliver the right sort of performance and have the right performance measurement, where you don't have the same level of quality assurance and coaching that you typically would. But we've had a lot of success with it. And part of that is because you can find folks that are gig workers that are already passionate about a given vertical or have some background of experience. They're very obviously flexible. And it allows us to just essentially fill out that last sort of bit of what I'll say cutting with the scalpel versus the machete is, which is how do you make sure you deliver that service experience in those peaks without sort of putting undue pressure on your business model, trying to hire folks and train them for such short windows or utilizing overtime or things like that as a company. So we're bullish on it. I mean, I think I read somewhere that about 30% of folks have some sort of freelance or gig sort of extension, at least, to what they do full time. And so it opens up talent pools that are really compelling, that really haven't been accessed by our industry in the past.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting angle, that there's very specialized talent pools. And then there's also there's people out there that don't want a sort of 40, 50-hour a week job, that they would much rather be doing something else as their kind of core income, and then maybe 10, 12 hours a week focused on something else. Maybe if they're a gamer, they could spend 12 hours a week supporting other gamers, through a kind of gig model or something like that. So I think that, this creates new opportunities for the agents. I guess it must also create opportunities for you to manage those bursts. I mean, stuff like Black Friday, for example. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it takes about the same amount of effort to recruit, train, and put somebody in a position to deliver exceptional service, regardless of whether they're going to work on an account for 3 years or for 3 days. And so, there gets to be a point in that sort of tenure model where it's more efficient and effective for us to utilize a different model than our traditional sort of full-time equivalent model. And we're excited about what we've seen with gig to this point, and I think it will grow over time as more and more people adopt that method of work, because of some of the same things that you've mentioned, and also just because it provides that level of resiliency that in a market that's so full of uncertainty, you've got the ability to draw on a resource that we didn't have a couple of years ago. So it's exciting.
Okay, and so just to sort of wrap up, then we've covered a lot of stuff here. I mean, platforms, agents, changing role, resilience. I mean, what should we be looking out for? What do you see as some of the big BPO trends to watch out for over the next year or so? I mean, either as a result of coming out of the pandemic, or maybe just the accelerated CX transformation.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, at its core, Mark, I mean, you don't have to go much further than, pulling up a web browser or turning on the news to see that uncertainty is certain, right? Whether it's geopolitical events or, how we're looking at the economy or, employment picture, these sorts of dynamics are making the market extremely complex to operate in. And as a result, brands and product owners are looking for partners to help them navigate that, because we offer better scale and ability to bring best-in-class technologies and manage workforces in a way that's difficult for them to do themselves. Beyond that, I think there's going to be a couple of significant paradigm changes that benefit both consumers, brands, and folks in our industry. One of those is the concept of proactive service. And, in an always connected world, there are many, many signals around that can be used in order to forecast when a customer needs support or where they might go for that support, right? And you've already seen some of this take hold, whether it's like a recall on an automotive issue, or if there's a shipping delay, being notified about that ahead of time. This is only going to continue to proliferate. And so those that have got the best sort of understanding of their customer and where they're having friction in their service journey and can proactively take steps with the right permissions to solve for that, I think is a really big paradigm shift in the way that we think about service. I think that beyond that, you'll just continue to see more and more cloud and digital coming to play that will help us to essentially drive that adoption curve that you started the call with. And what will enable that are massive volumes of training data, largely through the exhaust of human to client interactions that help that sort of trajectory to move forward. And that will begin to show itself first in personalization and doing a better job of understanding each customer and how they're uniquely different. And over time, moving to tools, like you mentioned, whether that's cognitive assistance, utilizing things like language translation and technologies that allow you to essentially remove the friction of geographic barriers. Even the friction of interaction with a human versus a digital assistant will become increasingly narrow. So, those things, I guess wrapped around that require a little bit of a different engagement model from people like myself and players in our space that really sort of recognizes that service is one of the most important strategies that companies need to anchor their value proposition in. In today's market, there's a lot of different channels to bring product to customer. Product life cycles are much shorter. There's fewer sort of retail outlets. And so the ability to deliver a service experience that folks have confidence in your brand, that they know that you'll stand behind product and that you value them as opposed to value product, is to me one of the most important paradigm shifts. And we see that already with the appointment of things like chief experience officers within companies. Well, we have many more conversations now about how the learnings from a back office interaction help inform product development and sales and marketing, and that you need to think about the bridge of back office, front office, and then finally the bridge of what I call front of stage and back of stage. It's not just about presenting a chatbot. It's about how well you've trained that chatbot, how you handle the fallout and escalation where needed, and manage that front stage, backstage support. So that if you're like you and me during our regular lives as a consumer, that it feels like technology is working for us as opposed to us trying to figure out how to navigate a half-baked technology play.
Yeah. And those are some great points there. And in fact, this whole idea of how do you create customer value from the interactions with the customer rather than just worrying about the cost of providing customer service. I think that's another whole conversation. We probably need to get you back in a few months to just to talk about that switch from charging for customer service compared to what kind of value are we going to build together.
Yeah, I'd love that. Like I say, those are the conversations and the paradigm shift that I've felt. I've been at Alorica for 3 years. And even in that time, Mark, it's the conversations are more about return on investment than they are on cost containment and efficiency. And, that's exciting because it really represents the fact that, building a partnership requires on both the client and the BPO provider to think holistically around customer experience as opposed to a fragment of it, which oftentimes can just create more problems downstream if not done in the right context.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.